Welcome to Juneteenth 101 podcast and lecture series, the podcast where we discuss all things Juneteenth. I am your host, Dr. Cassie Sade Turnipseed, and I want to acknowledge my co host and co producer, Brother Kareem Muhammad, as well as our resident scholar, Dr. Delridge Hunter, as they join me as co host today. Hey, Kareem, how you doing?
Salam alaikum, hotel, free land, power to the people. All things Juneteenth.
All things Juneteenth. Dr. Hunter, how are you today?
Doing well. I'm doing well. It's very nice to be here in New York.
Oh, cool. All right, this podcast is presented by Do Betta Productions, bridging the gap to knowledge, and that's the Cotton-Pickin Truth. Because when you know better, you do better. And this series of incredibly informative lectures is presented weekly in partnership with Mississippi-based Khafre Inc., the local organizing committee of Greenville, Mississippi, TransArt of New York, Jackson State University's History and Philosophy Department, and Juneteenth Festival producers nationwide, who are also members of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, NJOF. These lectures are designed to teach and or inform the world about all things Juneteenth. This week, Juneteenth podcast presents one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, and that's Dr. Tara White. She is an assistant professor of history at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington, where she specializes in African American women's history and public history. Her research area includes public history, African American history, women's history, Southern history, and civil rights history. She has more than 25 years of professional experience in museums, historic sites, and archives. Her topic today is all things African American historically speaking. Okay, we're just going to talk about, it's going to be a discussion, whatever we want to talk about as it relates to African American history. But more about Dr. Tara White. Dr. White is the first African American woman to earn a PhD in public history from Middle Tennessee State University. Yes, yes. I'm number two. She's number one. She also holds a Master's of Art degree from Coopertown Graduate Program at SUNY in New York. You're going to have to help me with this. Oninata?
Oniata.
Yeah,
Nata.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a
It's in
bachelor's,
the Catskills.
okay, and a bachelor's degree of science from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Um, Dr. White is active in numerous professional associations. Dr. White has worked with a number of history museums and historic sites in various capacities. She has served on staffs of Alabama State University, the American Association for State and Local Histories, and the Alabama Historical Commission, where she was the site director for the Alabama State Capitol and the Montgomery Greyhound bus station, now called Freedom Rise Museum. This is truly what all things Juneteenth is about. So, this long overdue discussion begins right now. So, please put your hands together and welcome to the mic Dr. Tara White.
Thank you. Thank you for that generous introduction. It is a blessing to be here with you. I'm really honored to be here. You have been out here working and doing excellent work, and I'm actually so proud of you and the work that you're doing. Believe it or not, she's one of the professors for one of my mentees, and she thinks the world of you. So I told her when she came into the class, "Oh, you're in good hands with her. You're good. You're gonna be good." And so I'm very happy. I'm now happy that I sent her there, because I told her, I said, you need to go back. And so she's doing great work. She's very happy to be working with you.
Yeah,
And
one of my students at
I'm
Jackson State. Yeah.
absolutely wonderful Masters of History program at Jackson State. And I told her she was not going to regret it, and she doesn't. She really doesn't.
Good.
So yeah, so it's wonderful to be here. Great to be in Wilmington. I'm actually an Alabama native though, so I see a bunch of Mississippi people on the line and everything. And so it's, Mississippi was always right next door. I have, half of my siblings are actually descended from Mississippi. My younger siblings, their family are actually is from Jackson. Yeah, families from Jackson. Their grandmother for years ran a business in Jackson called Annie Mae's Cafe in Jackson, in downtown Jackson. Unfortunately, they died as a result of a break-in at their place. Actually, it was the first year I went to graduate school. Someone broke into the restaurant, and she and her husband were both, murdered in the restaurant. But they had served the Jackson, Mississippi community for years, and they were beloved by the people in Jackson. Yeah. And in fact,
Sorry.
Lil Milton named one of his albums. The cover of the album, my step grandmother is on the cover, and the restaurant window is actually on the cover of the album. So yeah, so Jacksonians love them, and they love Jacksonians.
Hmm.
Um,
Wonderful.
yes. So, but it's great to be here talking about something that I love, African American history, that I ended up doing quite by mistake. It was a fluke that I ended up in this field. I started off doing an internship, and like I said, I was from Alabama. I was a science major, undergraduate, and so I was working, needed a job, believe it or not, and was interested in going to graduate school in public health. And so I'm so glad I didn't go public health with the last couple of years we've had, but was interested in going in public health, and I took an internship just to have a job, and it was from one of my professors. The only history course I took in college was African American history, and the professor encouraged me to do the internship. I did it, and realized I really enjoyed museums, and I enjoyed the way museums presented history, because I actually, that was the only class I took in college. African American history was the only course I took in college because I decided to take AP history in high school and to take the AP test to get the credit, because I didn't see myself. I could not see myself in the American story. I knew we were there, but the way that it was taught,
That's right.
I did not see myself. And so going into the Civil Rights Institute, there were a lot of shocks. And one of those shocks for me was learning about my hometown. Now, I'm from Montgomery, Alabama, the historic Montgomery, Alabama. With all of that history, I had to go to Birmingham to learn that story, which I thought was
Hmm.
crazy, right? That I had to go somewhere else to learn about my hometown. So that was the first thing that caused me to start thinking about this, and thinking about the power of museums and the power of place to tell stories. Okay. And so I decided that I wanted to go back to school, and fell in love with history, and decided that I wanted to go back to school and go back in, actually in museums. And so that's when I went to the Cooperstown program, and decided to do history and museum studies there. The Cooperstown program was great for me, although it was very similar to most of our institutions. Very Harriet, white, 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 really white. I think I was the only black person in the village of Cooperstown when I was there. And one of my girlfriends, who had been one of my pre med buddies, because I was pre med undergrad, told me, she said, she was from Brooklyn. And she said, "Girl, you're going to increase the black population in Cooperstown like 400%." And I thought she was joking, right? And I get up there and she is telling the truth. There are no black people up there.
Yeah.
I went and got mine, and I had the good fortune of having a program director who was an African American woman, and the first person. Speaking of first, she was the first person to finish this program, first African American to finish this program, and I was the second, right? So again, in those pioneering roles again, and Gretchen Soren, Dr. Gretchen Soren. I learned so much about museums from her. I learned a lot about historical organizations and and about history, because we had a really strong history component and a really strong museum component. Thankfully, I kept my foot in both worlds. I had a master's topic when I left Birmingham. One of the ladies who had been involved in the civil rights movement there told me that I was going to do my master's thesis on women in the movement in Birmingham. And like a good little Southern girl, I said, "Yes, ma'am," because you don't tell grown people what you're not going to do, right? Although I was an adult, but she was a whole lot like growner than I was. And I said, "Yes, ma'am," and went there and did the master's thesis. And that continued my interest in African American history and African American women's history, but also my interest in African Americans in Alabama in the South. And so I continue to research and write about black people in Alabama, black people in the civil rights movement in Alabama, and women, African American women in Alabama. So that's been a big part of my work. But another big part of my work has been place. It's one thing to read about something or to hear about something, but it's a whole nother thing to actually be there on the ground, right? In that place where history happened. And so the power of place is something I've always wanted to harness and to use to tell stories. So when I ended up out of school working in a number of places. One was a county called Lowndes County in Alabama, and most people have heard of Lowndes County in
Yes.
Alabama. Well, my very first job out of full-time job, because I came out and I actually didn't intend to stay in Alabama. Came out and did a consulting gig with one of my mentors. It's great to have good mentors.
Yes.
Who was at the Sloss Furnaces in Birmingham, one of the working steel mills, steel mill museums. So I did a consulting job with her. Found out my father at the time had cancer, and that the cancer was terminal. I had a job in upstate New York that I let go, didn't take, because I was going to do the consulting gig and then go take this job. I didn't do it, and I stayed in Alabama. And so I ended up in Lowndes County, working at the Calhoun School in Lowndes County, and working at the Calhoun School for a year was an amazing experience for a lot of different reasons. You have those experiences that are inspiring, and the history of the place was incredible. The experience was one of those what not to do kind of, you learn what to do from experiences. You learn either what to do or what not to do. And so I had a lot of what not to do's in that particular job. But African American self-determination was one of the big things that I learned about in working in the Calhoun, working at the Calhoun School, and African American landowners, right? Land owning and self determination were two big things I learned about, and so that would propel me once I went back to graduate school to study that period. So to look at the Gilded Age and the Progressive era, the period immediately after Reconstruction up to the 1920s or 30s, because I wanted to understand how the civil rights movement happened in some ways. We the way African American history is presented, black people, enslavement ends, you have the Reconstruction, which they half tale, and then black people are all right for a while, and then they get pissed off in the 50s and 60s, and the whole civil rights movement starts, right? But what I learned, of course, Gilded Age and Progressive Era, was that wasn't the case, and it was things running into schools like the Calhoun School, an African American school, that taught me that black people had all kinds of stuff going during
Right.
that period. That we had schools, we had hospitals, we had banks, we had our own financial districts, we had all kinds of stuff, right? And that we powered the golden age of black business, right? And the golden age of African American institutions and institution building. So that was really what was exciting for me. But it like I said, it caused me for the next degree to go back and to look at how we got there, and what were the things that caused us to be there. Of course, one of those things is looking at the development. For me, was looking at the development of Jim Crow, and how that happened, and kind of some of the hows and whys, and that was it was instructive for me, and particularly for this time that we live in now, understanding Jim Crow and the development of this movement, to enshrine white supremacy across the South. I get this makes this time, it makes sense. So, anyways, but I've been, really engaged in trying to illuminate the stories of African Americans, really tell our stories, to talk about our institutions, to talk about people we have not heard of, we don't know, to instruct young people about people who had a whole lot less, even for folks who don't have a whole lot. Because when before I got to Wilmington, I worked for 10 years in Selma, Alabama. And I taught community college for 10 years at Wallace Community College. I was a history faculty member, but also I was a department chair, or administrator, department chair, for Arts and Sciences Division at Wallace. And I had some of, my students were from the Black Belt. These are some of the poorest students in the country, really. And trying to, helping my students to see life bigger and broader, right? And to know that there was a whole lot more out there, that there was a larger world out there, and that there were people who had and had experienced poverty and the limits, of Jim Crow, right? and continue to push forward and continue to excel. I wanted them to understand that no, you're not in a new situation. Other people have been in this situation, but I want you to continue to push and imagine a world that's bigger than this, because the world is much larger than this. And so,
Mm.
um, so some of my career trajectory has been, mentoring students and inspiring young people, and working with young people to get to see life broader. Some of it has been about, like I said, telling African American stories and talking about these people that in places and organizations and institutions that we don't know. And then some of it has been trying to write, and so that's that's the latest part of it. It's really trying to write the stuff, so that you have, they are, these stories and these people are part of the scholarly record and the historical record in a different way, right? That their stories have been pulled out and highlighted in the ways that they need to be.
Yes. Yes.
See, what
Beautiful.
Karen has basically outlined is public history, but so many people still do not know um, what public history is. Tara, could you please just define it for the sake of record?
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, public history, when we think about history in the
Broader sense.
traditionally academic
Right.
sense, we think about
Right.
people who write write books and articles, right? And they're talking to, although in a lot of cases they assume they're talking to the public. I've been saying this to my colleagues for a long time, and I think they get really mad at me about this, but I don't care. People aren't reading your book, man. I mean, or lady, sis, a man, or dude, or whatever. People are not reading your books.
That's right.
Folks I mean, there are some people who are. We do have a bunch of people who read and enjoy reading. I've always been one of those. But for the most part, the general public is not doing that. That's not how they consume ordinary, everyday
That's right.
folks. And,
That's
and,
right.
and I'm not even, ordinary, everyday black folks aren't consuming history that way.
That's right.
They're consuming history through
Documentaries.
online media, through
Documentaries.
documentaries,
That's right.
through movies, through what they can find online. So if they're consuming it that way, what they see at museums and at historic places or whatever, and so if they're consuming it that way, we need to give it to them in the way that they're consuming it, right? And so for public history, public historians seek to use the tools of history, right? We have to do the research, we have to do the scholarship, right, and the writing to produce this stuff. Now it takes that level of research and scholarship to do that, right? But we produce and tell stories and do history in a different way. And it's the same process, different output,
Mm-hmm.
if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're going through
Great.
the exact same process, but we're creating an entirely different product, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that product might be a documentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
That product might be a museum exhibit. The
Mm-hmm.
product might be
Monument.
a
A
monument, a
monument. Yes.
memorial. It might
Yes.
be a National Register
Right.
nomination or a
Right.
marker. It
Right.
might be, a web page on this
Yes.
particular subject,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because that's another way, again, that people are consuming history. And so we are concerned with making sure that people get the stories. It could be a museum to exhibit or a tour or a
Mm-hmm.
tour. But it's making sure that people get these stories and they get them in the way that they understand them, right?
Great.
The
Yeah.
way that I like to explain it is that, people understand historians. Okay, you understand that historians write about it, they talk about it, but public historians be about it. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't be surprised if I come up with a shirt now. Don't be looking at me. Now hey, watch this though. Watch this cuz I will cite a sister.
I know you will. I
That's
know
right.
you will.
That's
And
right.
one of my
That's right.
favorite quotes that you gave me was the whole idea of white privilege and how certain, well, white people, it's like they receive a heightened awareness of their privilege. The way you said that to me years ago, it has stuck with me. You know, when you're talking about relationships with white folk and when they come into places like the Mississippi Delta, there is a heightened awareness of their privilege and they change, you know, because of that association and affiliation with all this privilege. They're like, oh, okay, I got it like that, and go with it. But what I wanted you to also do for us really quickly, because when you talked about your Annie Mae's Cafe, and I'm so sorry for that story, and you know
Yes,
what happened.
as I am.
Um,
Right.
is there work being done to memorialize
Good,
them with a
good point.
I
Good
don't
point.
know. I really don't. And that's a really good question.
Yes.
That's a question I'll ask my siblings. Like I said, because that was Mrs. Donaldson was their grandmother. I will ask the siblings, and I will ask my aunt, well, their aunt that who I adopted. Ask Auntie Ophelia to see, what the if there is, because she really was a fixture in the Jackson community, and all of her kids at one point or another had gone to Jackson State and been a part of, been students at Jackson State at one point or another, right? And so that was a big part of their own family tradition. So I'll ask
because
and
I
see
think,
what they're doing.
yeah, honestly, I would like for that to be one of the projects, you know,
Absolutely. I
that,
like to be a part of that one.
okay.
I will talk to Auntie and actually get you in touch with her, and with Auntie Ophelia and Auntie Patsy, because those are the two who are there. I think my former stepfather guy, he's still in Alabama. I love his sisters. He's all right. He was a little crazy though, but I love his sisters. But yeah, for real.
Okay.
But I'll get in touch with them, let them know, and then I will also talk to my siblings, because I think she's somebody. She was an amateur, did amateur golf, and was very good, and well known in the local like I said, well known in the local Jackson community. She had a bunch of golf trophies, and just a good local black businesswoman. The whole city turned out for her when
Let
she
me ask
died.
this last question before I do. I want to remind the audience that this is a interactive dialogue kind of thing. So please get your questions together. I just wanted you to know, first off, is that there are no mistakes. There wasn't no mistake that you happen to become uh, one of my sheroes as a public historian. And I really am curious about, my work and the passion that I have for cotton. But besides that, what is missing, do you think, in the how can you explain? I mean, just the narrative and the historic sites and the things that contribute, public history wise, as it speaks to our contributions to this country. What do you think is missing in that
I
landscape?
That's a really good question. I've always been excited about your project, and I've always been excited about your work and your scholarship, because it honors ordinary people, right? In many cases, for when we think about, because I've, like I said, I have done civil rights movement for a long, long time. Well, a long time, not a long time, but for at least 25 years. And the things that people want to do is they want to pull up these icons. People love icons. They love big people, right? And but there are so many everyday, ordinary women. I was doing a program in Birmingham a few days ago, and um, the other person on the panel was oh God, I would blank on his name, but he's an author. He's a journalist and is just extremely funny, and I love him. But anyways, he mentioned one person, well, if we think about the civil rights movement and the right to vote, we need to, think about Amelia Boynton. And I was like, but Amelia Boynton is just one person. I mean, you had, if you're thinking about women, because that's what I was talking about. Okay, Amelia Boynton is one person, in Selma, but you still have Marie Foster, and you still
That's
have
right. Marie Foster.
you got Marie Foster and Margaret Moore, right?
Moore.
Two other women who were also there on the ground,
Hmm.
helping people.
That's
Marie
right.
Foster actually ran a voter clinic where she helped people to learn how to pass the test. So,
That's
she
right.
was doing a citizenship school, right?
Margaret Moore was the shoes.
And
And
Margaret
that's where
Moore was a
the
teacher.
flyers and all that stuff. She was the one.
That's right, and
That's
and a
right.
local teacher in
That's
the
right.
school, and
That's right.
really
And
put
jeopardize
her.
her job to make sure.
You see what
That's
I'm
right.
saying? And so it's
Yes.
these ordinary people that and not who do extraordinary things that we
That's
need to
right.
know about, and that is, I think, one of the things that I think we need to really highlight that. And what makes these people extraordinary is that they make hard choices. Hard choices mean you're not, we talk about how wonderful Rosa Parks is. Rosa Parks couldn't find a job in Montgomery,
That's
which is how
right.
she ended up in Michigan, right?
That's right.
She
That's
ended up
right.
in Detroit because
John Conyers.
there you go.
That's right.
She ended up in Detroit because people in Detroit, she had siblings, a sibling in Detroit who told her to come there. They could help her, and then also Senator Conyers
That's
told
right.
her, "You got a job.
That's right. That's
I'll
right.
hire you," and
That's
that's
right.
that's exactly what happened, right?
Mhm.
But ordinary people make a whole lot of hard choices. And what I find in many cases with activism is that folks don't want to make those hard choices. Everybody talked about what they would be with the civil rights movement and blah blah blah. Well, we have some real interesting times now. Who's willing to really step out and talk
That's right.
about, the voter disfranchisement that's happening now? Who's really wanting to talk about, the reshaping of the economy that is changing in a way that will
Declining.
leave out working class and poor people?
Hmm.
Who's willing to talk about
Hmm.
this real big fight against labor, right?
Hmm.
Organized labor, right? And how billionaires and these big corporations are funding this fight against labor, organized labor, and unionism that's happening because people realize, wait a minute, little people don't have options. So the only option for us is to get together, right? To come together
Hmm.
as a group and negotiate as a
Hmm.
group, which is what organized unionizing is, right? But folks don't want to talk about that.
Hmm.
Or the systemic nature of some of the
Hmm.
things that we've seen for a long time in our communities, right? Systems, you don't have to, with a system, you don't have to actually even be doing anything personally, right? You create the system to run whether you run it or not. Systems
Hmm.
still work, right?
That's right.
And so
It's a machine. That's
some of
right.
the ail and the ailments we see in our communities are systemic, and they were
Hmm.
created to be
Hmm.
systemic.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay, And so, but you don't, people don't really want to talk about that, right? Or the way that people are really trying to remove the voices. People don't want a democratic society. They don't want a democracy. People will say to you, when you say that we are a democracy, they will tell you point blank, flat footed, we live in a republic.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to remind them, no, person, we live in a democratic republic, meaning we the people elect our leaders. We elect the people who represent us. They're not chosen for us, right? That's how the system is supposed to work. And everyone is supposed to have the option of choosing who they would have to represent their voice, right? Right.
Go ahead, sister.
And so, but we have in place now, and we have a movement afoot where people are really moving, right, to want to take that option away from folks. And that ain't, and now, I'm talking about us, but that ain't just us. That's everybody who's not wealthy, who's not white and wealthy.
That part.
That's
Right.
great. That's great.
And so, we live in an interesting time, right? We live in an interesting time. And so we have to be willing to tell the truth. And in a time when there are repercussions
That's right.
for doing so,
That's
right?
See,
And
yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor. And Kareem, I'm sure you have
Oh my God.
comments you'd like to make. And Dr.
Oh
Hunt.
my God. Oh
Okay,
my
go
God.
ahead.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Sade. As always, you bring some hard hitters in, and definitely Sister Terry White. We definitely honor you for coming and being part and being as vocal as you are for the what's happening for sure. I have so many questions, and I'm just trying to get the feel. First one I wanted to ask, and when I was going to ask this question, your last statement kind of make me feel like I might want to be on the right track, and I'll tell you why. Are you familiar with Professor Robert White in Alabama?
Yeah, that's my cousin, my
I
play
think,
cousin Bobby.
but when you start talking about union and stuff, I said, oh, she know Brother Robert.
Oh yeah, I know Bobby.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's my play cousin.
Right.
I know Bobby
Okay.
very well.
Okay.
Yes.
So
yes.
yes, I definitely want to. A brilliant brother. You and him talk so much alike.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're working on.
I
the
even know his
campaign.
mama and his wife, so I know
Yeah, you
his
good.
baby is in law school up here.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was about to
she's my
say.
baby. She's
That
my
would make me
baby.
think that you would probably relate
She's
it
my god
because
baby.
you, he got relatives up there, his daughter up there.
Yeah, that's my I'm my other mama. So
I wanted to ask you another question, which was pertaining to where you're at. Are you familiar? And I know you talked about focusing on women in the historical aspects and contribution of them. Polymary.
polymer. Oh God, yes. I'm
Could you
familiar.
talk a little bit about polymary to the people? A lot of people are not familiar with this giant of a woman. They hear about Mary Church Terrell and Mary Beth Bethune, but polymary, very seldom many people know who this woman is.
Polly Murray was ahead of her time for everything. And I mean, seriously, she really was. So Polly Murray ended up going to Howard Law School, and actually, she's in law school in the 1940s, in the same period that you got Thurgood Marshall in law, different folks in law school, right? And she knows these guys. But what Polly Murray is, one of the big things she does, she ends up working in law, but can't really, it's hard for her to get when people go to law school, they get out and they get hired by these firms. It was really hard for her to be placed because people didn't even want to consider women working in law at that time. And so she ends up working, doing, just here and there. But one of the jobs, or one particular person she ends up working with, is the person we now know as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Who became the Supreme Court justice. And Paulie is working on, of course, the Negro question, right? And the issue of disfranchisement, the issue of Jim Crow, the issue of discrimination in education, and all, all across every aspect of African American life. What she does that was transformative for the civil rights movement. She goes in and she researches Jim Crow laws in every state of the union, every state, all 50. And she publishes this bad boy. I mean, a catalog list of all the Jim Crow laws. And believe it or not, this is the list that they use. Thurgood Marshall used to call it the Bible, right? Because this is what they use to actually do their work. She was, and again, foundational work in civil rights, civil rights law. What is unfortunate, though, like I said, is that she was not able to really she was not really able to benefit because she was so far ahead of her time, right? Not just in civil rights law, but in laws related to women, right, and women's rights. The questions that Ruth Bader Ginsburg started to ask, right, about women and women's legal rights and their rights before the law and under the law, right, come from conversations she's had with Pauli Murray, right? And so it's these questions that later on help to fuel not only the laws, the changes in laws that happened in the 1960s and 70s with regard to women, but also the women's movement of the 1970s. That's all. The 60s and 70s. That's a lot of those questions and the legal questions that preceded them were Pauli Murray. She and she was just an amazing lady. Went to law school, then went back for a doctorate, and she was a professor for a long time. She realized she couldn't do anything just with the law degree, so she went back and got a PhD. Then she decided that she had a spiritual awakening. Well, she went through the thing with women and gender, and I say the thing meaning she starts to ask these big questions about women and gender. And in fact, she is one of the people in the early days of the women's movement that helped to create the National Organization of Women. Okay, she's one of the founders of that organization because, like I said, she's been asking these questions. By the time they get there, she had been asking these questions for a long time. She had a spiritual awakening and started to, raise these ideas about not just spirituality, but the church and women and whatever. And so she becomes an Episcopal priest at a time when you don't really have women as Episcopal priests, right? And then is ordained and eventually becomes leadership in the Episcopal Church. And so she is, when I say multifaceted, I'm saying she really, really, really was multifaceted, and she was a lesbian woman, and this was something that people didn't really want to deal with in the 1930s and 40s and 50s and 60s when she's coming along, right? And that's not an issue that she actually deals with in the spaces, but she does lay the foundation too for us asking some of those questions about the rights of people in the LGBT community. And she is a champion, or she is championed by the folks in the LGBT community.
And thank you for that. And if, a lot of us I know during the civil rights era, when the 64, 65 civil rights bill, and we talk about it from a Black struggle perspective, that we got our civil, we came to get our civil rights, but the LBTG community wind up getting theirs as well. Many of us don't know it was Polly Mary that was part of writing the piece in the civil rights bill, that because they was going to, they were, what happened was briefly, to keep them from signing the bill, they put women's a clause in there about women's, and they feel that the Democratic Senate was going to deny it.
That's
But they
right.
went and got Mary and asked her to write something in there to address that issue. And from what she wrote, changed the whole perimeter of what they did from there. So again, thank you about her, because a lot of our people are really asleep on this powerful Black woman.
Absolutely. And you know, sleep on the role that you know, when we think about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 transformed the lives of African Americans, absolutely, but it also transformed the lives of women, right? And that is something that is kind of muted, partly because, you know, a lot of women don't want to accept that it was that the movement, right, benefited them as well, right? When we think about Civil Rights Act of 1964, when we think about Title IX, right? Especially right now, where we, you know, we're everybody's praying and being pissed off, because I'm just pissed off. I am praying too, but I'm pissed off too, about Brittany Griner and what she's going on over there in Russia. You know, her being held there for on a humbug, really. But you know, just and the treatment of African American and women athletes, right? That Brittany has to be in Russia playing so that she could get the paper, right? She could get the same paper that brothers in the NBA get now, and so that's a whole nother conversation there, right? And had she been able to play here and get that same paper, she wouldn't have been in Russia. Right.
We have another question from Dr.
I have a
Hunter.
question.
Since
Why
we're
don't you
getting
write
short
the book?
on time. Go ahead, Dr. Hunter.
I want you to write a book, Dr. White.
You want me to write a book?
I want you to write that book.
That book.
I want you to write on your family and the sister y'all were talking about. You can do it. You can improve them together.
I will definitely consider it.
I don't do history. I do our story. I don't do his story.
Right. We do our story.
I agree with y'all when y'all say you're historian. I'm not a historian.
Right.
I studied interdisciplinary because I wanted to learn both the culture of whiteness that y'all call white supremacists. I never think it's my responsibility to affirm them in what they believe they are. My job is to tell the truth of who they are. It's the culture of whiteness that practices all of these things we're talking about, not white supremacists. We got to write on the sister because she, like Ella Baker, were very important to the movement. But nobody usually thinks of them as an important person. If you don't write the story, who's going to write it?
Well, Paula Murray. Now, the truth, brother, is that somebody is actually writing on Paula Murray.
Right.
Yeah.
People not reading.
There's a sister who is writing. A sister historian, and I can't remember who off the top of my head. The name is not coming, but that's my age more than anything else. And so, but there is a sister writing about Pauli Murray, and then Ella Baker, a righteous sister.
I miss the one.
I can see her face. Who wrote the book on Ella Baker did an amazing job. Yeah. Say that again, brother.
No, I know about it. Someone has written it.
Yes,
Fine.
yes.
But you don't really get what I'm saying.
Okay.
You can't write too much on us.
Well, that's true. You can't. You're right. You can't.
Okay?
We can't.
So what I'm trying to, I'm with TransArt when we're in New York, and by the way, Coolstown does have African American. It's just that the African American population came in 1600, and they're all over New York, but you don't see them because they don't know you, they don't know us, so they don't. They're just part of the population. So, but the point I'm making is that our responsibility at TransArt is to collect and disseminate and preach the word. So what we do is we do it in many ways. We do it as a jazz concert. We do it as exhibition. We do it as plays. We do it as storytelling. You know, it's
That's
so
public history.
what I'm doing now is interviewing the
Yep.
people
Hmm. Gotcha.
so that we can, you know, and I've already set up our radio station, giving space, and I take people in there just so I can talk. So uh, we have to be more open in terms of how we treat what we're doing and don't think it is not something we should do too. So I'm
Gotcha.
saying to you, your family needs to be promoted. And the way you do it is you put it in paper. The one thing I like about the European Americans is that they put it on paper. They document everything. All the people who work down in Port Royal wrote letters to each other, and those letters have been published.
Hmm.
Okay? Now, we say we have material also about them, and that was done by the Workers' Project, the Federal Writers Project, that when they interviewed these African Americans. So we got thousands of pages that have been presented on nothing but South Carolina.
Hmm.
Same thing about Texas. Same thing about Alabama,
Hmm.
Tennessee.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. We have it there. All we got to do is find the primary documents and use them to make this material available to the rest of the population. And
Gotcha.
that's what I would suggest.
Mm-mm. I agree. I agree. I agree. And I will. I will. I will definitely do that. I'm working on. I've been working. I have a small site, and it's going slow, and it's been going slow because I've been pulled in 1,000 directions. But I'm gonna
Mhm.
concentrate on it a little bit more so I can put those stories out there. And like I was talking about with Margaret Moore and Marie Foster and these other people, you know, and the Pauli Murrays and these other folks that people don't know about, right?
Anna Hagen,
I'm
that's
gonna,
right.
yes, yes, yes. I'm gonna talk more about these folks, right, on this site because I think it's important for
Yes.
people to
Yes.
do. And so what I've
Yes.
been trying to do for Alabama, I think I'm gonna expand that a little bit more
Great.
for Alabama
Great. I,
people.
The other thing is your students can become activists doing
Yes.
this work.
I have
We can
one more, Dr. Sade, and I know we're going to open up, and I know we are very
And
short.
we are
go
very
ahead.
Because
short on time. So we only have 3 minutes left, but go ahead, Kareem.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, but I'm just about the when you mentioned about Reconstruction and your study around that, I think that's a good area that we can focus on more. So is that when we say Reconstruction and Jim Crow, I like what Ralph Logan called it when he called it the Nader.
Mhm.
Rayford Logan,
Yeah,
yes,
Rayford
yes, yes.
Logan.
The Nadir, and that's during actually that's post Reconstruction during my period during the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. That was
Yeah.
another thing that I wanted to see what in the hell happened, right?
Yes. I
And
studied
so
deeply in that. Yes.
ooh, man. But
Yes.
Reconstruction, there's
Yes.
some good sisters out
Yes.
there, y'all, who are
Yes.
doing really good work. There's a
Yes.
sister by the name of Kadada Williams who
Mhm.
has a podcast called Seizing Freedom.
Mhm.
Y'all, it is, oh my goodness gracious, if you haven't heard it, it is so good. She's that sister's just bad. But Seizing Freedom is an amazing podcast, and she puts out a new, she's just put out a new season on it. I listen to it because it's just, as historians, we of course you're looking at your own period. That's
Yes.
her period, right? So she's doing all
Yes.
kinds of stuff. Another sister by the name of Hillary Green. Hillary is has been doing some amazing work, and Hillary is coming out with more stuff, looking at African American soldiers. There's Latrice Donaldson that's looking at black
Mm-hmm.
soldiers and black experience in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Another brother, a brother by the name of Holly Pinero, just his book would be dropping on the USCT. We out here doing this work, y'all. I promise y'all. Historians are out there, but as I
That's right.
tell my colleagues, y'all, we talking to other historians, right? We gotta find a way. It's a 20-year difference, and I've looked at this, y'all. I told you I've been in this field for about 25 years. I've looked at this. It's about a 20-year difference between when the book drops and then when you see it in a museum or an
That's
exhibit,
right.
right? And so we got to shorten that. We can't afford that 20 years, right? We can't afford. And so, like the brother was saying, Brother Hunter was saying, it needs to be a play. It needs to be a kind of podcast. It need to be something else, right? So ordinary everyday folks can get a hold to it because we need this knowledge. Without the scripture says, without vision, a people perish,
Yes.
right? I'll also say, without knowledge, a people perish. Without
Yes.
knowledge, and especially self-knowledge. I
Yes.
love and I consider myself fortunate to do. I'd be doing this if I wasn't get paid to do it.
Right.
I mean,
That's
that's
me.
how
That's
much I
me. That's
love
me.
what I do, right?
I
But
don't get paid.
okay, and so but the thing is, I understand that I build on the legacy of Carter G. Woodson,
Yes.
right? I
Yes.
build on that legacy,
That's right.
and
That's right.
W.B. Du
Ray
Bois.
for
You
Logan
know,
too.
that's right. And
That's
so
right.
I understand that there is something that I have to leave. And
Mhm.
Mary McLeod Bethune, because although she
Yes.
wasn't a historian for years, she was president of the
Mhm.
Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which
That's right.
later became.
Archive and create an archive.
That's right. And she
That's right.
created the National
Women.
Archive of Black Women's
Women.
History.
That's
Actually,
right.
I deal with that in my book that's forthcoming. But
Mm.
anyways, yeah. And so, we have to continue to think about leaving a legacy. And we have to think about that legacy because, I'm going to end on it. My grandmother, God, she was, my grandmother died about 6 years ago. And my grandmother would have been 100 years old this year.
Mm.
She was born in 1922. She would have been 100 years old this year.
Mm.
And she always told us, my sisters are on here. The two of those folks who are descended from the Jackson people, Denise and Mary, and I'll talk to y'all about hooking up with Dr. Turnipseed and doing something to honor your grandmother later.
Hey, brother
But
Kareem.
that's right. And so, and that's right. But I say our maternal grandmother, our mama's mama, she always talked about our family. And she always told us who we were descended from. She always told us
Mm.
stories about where we come from.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
all
Mm.
of us
Mm.
know who we come from, right? And
Mm.
what we've come from. But
Mm.
we have to continue to tell the stories that our
Mm.
children will know who they are. Part of the
Mm.
problem with our children is that our children don't know who they are.
Mm. Carter G. Woodson told us that was going to be a problem.
That's right.
So, look,
That's right.
I want to say thank you so much, Dr. White. I love you. I love your
Love
passion,
you too, girl.
everything you about, girl. And look, I know there are people in the chat or in the audience who would like to ask a question. If there is one, we have time for only one. But then I want to thank Sam for the link that he's put in here for Dr. Murray and Lee, of course. My brother Leon is always on point, and he would like to say thank you from Minnesota and Arizona.
Yes.
Uh, And he was saying another great presentation, and it has been that for sure. So let us just, because it is after 6, and we're going to go ahead and keep true to our word that this is an hour, and we don't want to take up too much of your day. And I just want to thank each and every one of you so much for joining us this week for this lecture. I certainly know that you learned some important things about African contribution to American history, and this lecture series is presented by Khafre Inc., the local organizing committee, TransArt, Jackson State University's History and Philosophy Department, and Juneteenth Festival producers nationwide who are members of the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, NJOF. So please do continue to spread the word, tell friends about our Juneteenth 101 podcast, and be sure to join us next Sunday, August 7th, as we continue our 2022 series with a very special surprise presentation. So I hope to see you every Sunday at 5 Central Standard Time right here in the Zoom room. And again, when you know better, say what now?
You do better.
You do better.
Yeah, let us pray. Let us pray. Brother Kareem, Dr. Hunter, do you have any closing remarks? With that, I say,
John always says, each one teach one, each one reach one. Hallelujah, continue on. The struggle continues.
Thank you.
Peace and love. Until next time, all things Juneteenth.
All things Juneteenth.
all things Juneteenth.
Beautiful, Sister Terry. Beautiful.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
You're a warrior.
And we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Work.
Yes, we
Yes,
will.
ma'am.
Yes,
See
we
you
will.
in the I'm tired of you being in the same position.
Thank you, Dr. Sade.
Be assistant professors and those men are walking around there, ain't doing nothing, and they're hiding you. I don't like that. I'm gonna say it publicly.
Say what
I
now?
want you to promote it.
You
I
want
want you
want
to
us
be a
promoted?
full professor before I leave the earth. And you know how old I am. I'm 81 years old. I want you to be a professor. I'm tired of y'all assistant professor.
Oh, we going up.
we going up.
We going up.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Serious.
And you know, Sister Terry, when you mentioned about who's speaking out, we know if nobody else, Minister Farrakhan definitely keeps us abreast and keeps us out front and letting us know what we should be doing.
Telling the truth. Telling the
That's
truth
right.
all the time. Yes, he
That's
does.
right.
Yes,
That's
he
right.
does. So, all right.
With that, I would say I
All right, y'all.
and
Have a good weekend. Have a good day. Have a good week.
Thank you.
All right.
Again, sister. Love you.
Love you
Thank
too,
you.
sweetie.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sade.
You're welcome. Bye, y'all. Peace.
Everybody have a good evening.
You too.
Take care, y'all.
All right, Dr. Hunn.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Hunn.